So when my mother passed away, it was probably one of the saddest days that I recall. I remember holding her hand and realizing that this was going to be the last time I would see her as I said goodbye to her in a hospital bed. The reason why I bring up her passing, of course, heartbreaking, but the question that came to my mind, not that day and not even within a month or two of her passing, but was really, what is the inheritance that she is leaving me and how will I remember her? Thinking about her final moments is not necessarily how I want to always remember her. Thinking about when we had wonderful times together and had lunches and went shopping, of course that's how I want to remember her. But there were other moments too, challenging, hard moments as well, that I of course am always challenged of how do I want to contemplate that memory. This week in our Torah portion, Pinchas, we read of Zelophehad's daughters. So Zelophehad had 5 girls, and the problem at the time of the Bible that the story took place was that there was inheritance laws. And women, well, I'm sure you can imagine, women were not the ones who were lucky enough to be the inheritors. Though actually there's an article from Rabbi Dr. David Aaron that argues that in the ancient Near East culture, but that's for a different day at a different point. What we're focusing on is what the Bible teaches us, which is women weren't allowed to inherit. Then they go ahead and you can imagine would like to inherit, and an exception is made and they're able to inherit. But what do they inherit? What are they going to bring with them? What are they going to remember? The inheritance laws in the Bible were really relating to and dealing with land division, and how do we connect and maintain former generations with new generations, recognizing that if you divide up the plot of land from all of the children, you're not going to have much of a plot left. And as we know from today, siblings don't always get along. So if you give your land to so-and-so, they may or may not necessarily even want to share it with their siblings. And so parents are kind of left struggling with how do they divide it. And so for good or for bad, it went to the first, the eldest male, and everybody else had to find something else to do and sustain themselves. Lucky for them. But beyond just the physicality of the land and financially, I'm really struggled and thought, what is it that we remember? There's a Native American tradition which offers and teaches us that when we do things and we engage with them in the world, that it's an opportunity for us to bring their memory with us. So you can say things like, I am doing this with my mother, or in honor of my mother, or maybe even in memory of my mother. In Judaism, we do something similar. We love to make donations at least once a year in memory of our loved one. Sometimes we may even go on a fun run to raise money in memory of our loved one, or we may find other ways to remember. Some of the stuff that I recall specifically, though, it's not just that I'm going to bring her memory with us. I don't know about you, but I'm sure some of you have objects from your loved ones. I have a few dresses that my mom had. I have some items of hers that still kind of smell of her, just ever so faintly at this point. And all of which, whether it's the memory or the object, I'm challenged to bring in with me. One of the practices that I learned about, in addition to inheritance, is the idea of having a will, but not just any type of will, a will that shares what you want your loved ones to remember. Some stories, some memories specific that you want them to think about. Wouldn't it be a wonderful gift to be able to give that too? So that when we think about how will we be remembered, we're sharing that practice of writing out what we want and learned in life, or ways that we want to bring spiritual gifts or other gifts to our loved ones and those who come after us. One of the gifts that my mother gave me, not just a memory of shopping and dinners and nails and other stuff, was the gift that my Uma, her mom, gave to her. Recipes that I still bring to light in life every single year and do so in her memory, which is part of the inheritance that she gave me. Not a material inheritance, a spiritual inheritance. The other spiritual inheritance beyond just the story is a struggle that I had to learn. So I'm sure you all know that there's a mitzvah, kavod av v'em, honor your father and your mother. Well, just like all of us, our relationship with our mothers or even our loved ones can at times be weighty and heavy and challenging. All the more so, pushing us for what do we do when they're no longer with us? And how do we honor their memory? And how will we carry them forward? All of which goes simply beyond just, I got this piece of material object, or I'm going to fight over some money. But it's something deeper and more enriching. It goes with us that we have to struggle with. I had a conversation recently with a congregant who lost a loved one. And we talked about how that relationship with that loved one does not cease even though their loved one is no longer here, but that they can still communicate and have interesting and in-depth conversations, partially around the issue of kavod av v'em, honoring your father and mother because they had a challenging relationship with a parent. But more than that is the idea that we go on in life, we struggle with those relationships, and even as we mature, if we are open to having and continuing an open dialogue with our loved one, the relationship that we had with our parent can also mature with us. It doesn't necessarily need to remain stagnant. And so again, while Zelophehad's daughters dealt with land and the transfer of that, I hope that even in contemplating what does it mean to inherit something and what does it mean to gift something, as we struggle with how we're going to remember our loved ones, and even for me at times how I remember my mom, we remember that it's not just the material and it's not just some stories, but it's also the continuing relationship that we have and the struggles that will push us to deepen them as we grow into our highest self. Shabbat Shalom.